Hello YouTubers, it's DasGregor, and I've got another story for you today. This one's entitled, A Bird Without Wings. Roger looked out the window at the blue sky. He stood for a moment wondering why he was still working. Quitting time was well over an hour ago. Things had to get done, he thought to himself. Just why do I end up doing them all the time? Roger watched as a bird flew over the clear sky. It soared with majestic awe as it glided through the air currents. For a moment Roger lost himself as he watched the bird, and he forgot where he was. Deep down inside he wished for the freedom to soar with wings that would take him to new heights. Only in my dreams, he thought to himself. A reality check showed that he was still in his office building, trying to finish the last of his work so he could go home for the evening. He slowly pulled himself away from the window and walked back down the aisle to his cubicle. One more system install he had to complete. Just one more file to install. He could go home for the night. He finished his work and then left to head home. And as he was going to his car, he noticed the same bird that he'd been watching earlier seemed to be sitting in the parking lot. Why would he stay here, he wondered to himself. It's such a beautiful evening. Why isn't he flown up into the mountains, up into the hills, somewhere where it's more beautiful, more serene and peaceful than here in this city, in this parking lot, at this office building? As Roger got closer to his car, the bird seemed to follow him. And just as he was opening the car door, he hears something. Why are you so glum? He looks about and says, What was that? And the bird says, Well, it was me, silly human. I'm the only one here. I'm talking to you. Why are you so glum? Roger looks around again. There's nobody here but this bird. Well, birds can't talk. Well, they can mimic, but they can't talk. So what is this about, he wonders to himself. And the bird hops closer and says, Why do you ignore me? Why do you not acknowledge that I'm talking to you? Are you deaf? Do you not hear me? Roger looks down and sees this bird and says, Well, are you talking to me? Well, of course I'm talking to you, says the bird. Well, all right then. Why are you talking to me? And the bird begins to weave this tale that he speaks to Roger. He says to him, I can see deep into your soul, and I could sense your yearning for freedom and adventure while you looked out the window. It almost caused me to fall from the sky. I could just sense your need, and I am here to fulfill that need. What can you do? Says Roger to the bird. You're just a silly little bird. I don't need this. I need to go home. I'm hungry, it's late, and I'm very tired. Roger goes ahead and opens the car door and begins to get in. And the bird hops up onto his window and says, Don't ignore me. I can tell you something that can benefit both you and me. You see, I once too was a human. I once wanted the freedom that a bird might have. But now I've searched throughout the world, and I'm tired, and I'm ready to come back to civilization. I'm ready to be a man again, and I sense that you would like to be a bird. And I have but one thing that you have to do. Pluck a feather from my plumage. And believe me, if it's in your heart that this is your desire, we may trade places. Oh, how ridiculous, Roger thinks to himself. How ridiculous. He goes ahead to humor the bird, plucks a feather from him, and goes ahead and jumps in his car, shuts the door, and about that time a man standing in front of his car says, I wouldn't do that if I were you. What do you mean? As he slams down on the lock to the car door. About that time, Roger began to feel very dizzy. Things seemed to be getting very big to him. And suddenly, as he's hopping around in his car seat, he realizes something's happened. I'm no longer a man. I've got wings. I've got feathers. I'm a bird. The man outside the car says, well, of course you are. I told you that this would happen if you plucked one of my feathers. But alas, I can't let you out. You've locked the car, and I can't get you out. Frustrated and angry, Roger says, well, get me out. I want out. I can't stay here. Well, I'm sorry, says the man, as he starts to walk off. If you'd only listen to me, he begins to mumble as he leaves the scene. Roger jumps and tries to fly. He stumbles everywhere with his new wings. He hasn't quite grasped the way that he should. He finds that with his little legs that he can hop from place to place much better than flittering around with his feathers. So he hops to the steering wheel, and he hops to the side of the window, and he begins to fumble as best he can with his beak with the lock. After what seems like an eternity, he's finally able to flip the lock up just enough that it seems to unlock the car. But then he falls and stumbles back to the seat. In great despair, he starts to cry because he realizes, what have I done? I'm stuck in this car. I can't open this car door. I can't become free. What am I going to do? It becomes dark as he sits there in despair, and Roger finally falls asleep. He's awakened the next morning by some loud noises outside, and he realizes that people are starting to arrive for work. Well, it's John and Mike, the janitorial staff. They'll help me. I'm sure they'll help me. So he jumps back up onto the windowsill, and he starts to squawk and squeal as best he can. And John walks over, and he says, well, look here, Mike. There's a bird inside this car. I wonder how he got trapped in there. We ought to let him go. About that time, Mike comes over, and they look down, and then they start to talk to each other for a bit. And then they decide, maybe we should keep this bird. Mike says to John, don't we have a bird cage somewhere? Yeah, I think we do. We had a parakeet one time, and I think the cage is still in storage after he died. We could put this bird in there. We could have a pet. We could stick him down in our basement where we work, and we'll have ourselves a nice little bird to hang out with. No, shouts Roger. You have to let me free. Did you hear something? Said Mike. John looks down. No, I don't think I did. It's me, let me out. Oh my gosh, I think the bird's talking. Yes, he's shouting. We're gonna be rich. We've got a talking bird here. They slowly open the car door while the other grabs Roger and makes sure that he doesn't get loose. They take him back into the office, and they put him in the bird cage that they found in the storage closet. A few days pass, and Roger, as glum and depressed as he could ever be, here he is, a bird, feathers that can allow him to fly, and he's imprisoned in this cage. Nowhere to go and nothing to do. Mike, one of the janitors, walks in. He's sitting there, slightly unhappy, slightly grumbling about his work, and a light bulb goes off in Roger's head. He begins to speak again to Mike, and he says, Mike, I understand what you're saying. I can see into your soul, and I can see your desires, and this isn't where you belong. Are you talking? Said Mike to Roger. Are you saying something? I was beginning to wonder if it was all in my head. Yes, I'm talking to you, said Roger to Mike. I have a proposition for you. And he begins to weave the most elaborate of stories that he could ever imagine, telling of freedom, of flight. He says, I have only one gift to give, and that is that we trade places. That if you pluck a feather from my plumage, take me out of this cage, then we can become replaced. You can take my place, and I can go free as a human again. Mike, without thinking, goes ahead and plucks a feather from the bird, lets him out of the cage. And before Roger can realize what happened, he's standing before a small bird on the floor. Before he can fly off, however, Roger scoops him up, puts him in the cage, closes the door. The next day, Roger goes into the office. His friend Justin is there, and he says, "Where have you been? You've been gone for a couple days, and we've been worried that you've been sick. We haven't heard anything from you, but your car is out there. We haven't heard tell nor feather of you all day long." Roger just smirks as he realizes how true Justin's metaphor is about what happened the last few days. And he says, it was just a lesson learned, and so that's the end. I hope you liked it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it's a good story for you. It's not as good as the written word. I've gone through and I've tried my best to memorize as much as I can of my stories, because I think it's kind of awkward to sit there and just read in front of the camera. Of course, it's kind of awkward just to sit here in front of the eye of the camera and talk to you. But either way, I hope you enjoyed this story on A Bird Without Wings. And until next time, I'll say tschüss, arrivederci, auf Wiedersehen. Good evening, good morning, good night, whatever you're having, have it. Enjoy it and have fun. Bye.